This is a personal thank you from a longtime player to Ion Hazzikostas, and probably not quite for the reasons you'd think. If you're listening to this, Ian, and I hope you are, then you're probably expecting it to be thanks for your open communication with Preach, but it's actually for work that you did in the past that I'm thanking you, not to downplay the fact that you are communicating with the player base. The perception of Blizzard is that it's very secretive, so every shred of communication from Blizzard is precious. And the more of it we get and the more in-depth it is, the better, and I do want to thank you for providing it, even when it's not easy. But it was actually during that interview that I found out that you were a class designer who picked new abilities for players back during Cataclysm, back in the days when players were still getting new abilities each expansion. And you ended up creating one of the best experiences I have ever had in World of Warcraft. Now this is going to be strange, but my favorite expansion by far is Cataclysm. That's not a common sentiment. And I'll agree readily that Cataclysm had its problems. I mean, there were no systems in place that kept players logging in, and I remember that once I had my gear high enough and my reputations and professions maxed out, I felt like I'd run out of things to do in the game and pretty much only logged in to raid. That being said, Cataclysm was my favorite expansion out of all of them because of the sheer awesomeness of my spec's design in Cataclysm. I have mained a Holy Paladin since 2005, and Cataclysm was the highlight of my career. And I believe that many of the big reasons were the addition of the very spells that you picked out for my class: Inquisition and Holy Radiance. In fact, I'm crossing my fingers you'll unprune those later, but enough about that. Time to heap some praise on you, Ian, for doing such an excellent job. So, why do I think that Inquisition and Holy Radiance were so awesome? Well, keep in mind that Inquisition was a holy power finisher for all three specs at the time. It was the ability that we got at level 81 while leveling up in Cataclysm. As a matter of fact, it was the only holy power finisher that I could use for damage while I was soloing. It was just a 30% buff to my holy damage. It did not deal direct damage, but it didn't need to. It felt like it was worth using, and like it shook up my rotation, encouraging me to switch away from Crusader Strike to do holy damage instead. And I had a lot of holy damage abilities at the time, by the by. Exorcism had no cooldown, and the Denounce talent at the time brought its mana cost down to something reasonable. On top of that, I had Consecration and Holy Wrath on my spell bar, so those could benefit from Inquisition. I loved it. In fact, I figured at the time that this was the best holy power finisher a healer could have under the circumstances, since having a finisher that dealt direct damage would probably be pretty hard to balance for a non-DPS class. And, well, pretty much every solo finisher since then that I've had on my spell bar to spend holy power on has either done only slightly more damage than the builders or even done less damage than the builders. Not near as satisfying as your brainchild, Inquisition, so kudos to you for that, Ian. And then there was Holy Radiance at level 83, the first real group heal I ever had. Having this tool in my kit made me feel like I was more effective as a healer than ever. Plus, once its design shifted to being an AoE heal with no cooldown that gave me holy power, it was even better. It's no wonder that design stuck around for years. I had multiple tools in my toolbox for single target healing and for multi-target healing. Build with Holy Radiance and finish with Light of Dawn. It was a great system, and you are the man to thank for it. You picked the perfect new abilities. Guardian of Ancient Kings at level 85 was iconic and awesome, and I don't want to downplay that. You made an excellent choice adding it in, especially as a reward for reaching the maximum level for the expansion, but unlike Inquisition and Holy Radiance, it was a cooldown that didn't impact my rotation, so as good as it was, it doesn't stand out as much in my mind, quite as much as the other two abilities that you picked. The total kit that I had back in Cataclysm was just overall perfect. I had plenty of damage abilities, at least one of which had no cooldown, which was awesome. I had holy power builders and spenders that made sense and were fun to use without anything holding them back from feeling awesome. I had group healing at my disposal at all times. I had nifty utility in Hammer of Justice and Rebuke. I had some really nice looking cooldowns, solid buffs, and mana management to boot. If you were a class designer back in Cataclysm, I have to tell you, You knocked it out of the park with Holy Paladins. Although, I'll admit that in a lot of ways, my kit in Cataclysm felt like it was cobbled together from abilities that were designed for other specs, like Exorcism, Consecration, Holy Wrath, Rebuke, and Inquisition. Those were some of the biggest contributors of awesomeness to my experience, and each of those was really designed for Retribution or Protection, not quite for Holy. But they were on my spell bar anyway, and I loved them! They were very fun to use while soloing, and made me feel like I was ready for anything. So while my kit in Cataclysm felt like it was cobbled together, it felt like it was cobbled together perfectly. Everything I experienced in the game in Cataclysm was experienced through that perfect toolkit. And if your interview is anything to go by, then I have you to thank for this experience, Ian. So thank you. Now, do it again, 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 do it again.